Right now on your phone, you have messages, notes, passwords, a record of who you are. Imagine a civilization of 5 million people left behind thousands of written messages, and every single one of them is still completely unreadable. Not lost, not destroyed, just locked. That is the Indus Valley script. And the terrifying part, we have no idea what they were trying to say. Here is what history class never told you. Around 2600 BCE, while the Egyptians were just starting to build the pyramids, there was already a civilization larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. With running water, flush toilets, and city planning so advanced it would not appear again for 3,000 years. They left behind a written language on thousands of artifacts. And in over a century of trying, not a single linguist, code breaker, or computer algorithm has managed to read one word of it. In the next 12 minutes, you will discover why this is not just archaeology's greatest failure. It may be the most important unsolved mystery in all of human history. Let's start with a number that should stop you cold. 1.25 million square kilometers. That is the territory of the Indus Valley civilization at its peak, roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE. For comparison, ancient Egypt controlled about 1 million square kilometers. Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization, was smaller still. The Indus Valley was the largest civilization on the planet, and most people could not tell you a single city's name. The two main cities were Mohenjo-Daro in what is now Pakistan, and Harappa, about 600 kilometers to the northeast. But those were just the capitals. Archaeologists have now identified over 1,500 settlements stretching from the Himalayan foothills down to the coast of the Arabian Sea and east into what is now India. Cities, towns, trading posts, port facilities, a network. And here is the detail that genuinely shocks historians. These cities had grid-patterned streets, perfectly planned, oriented to the compass. They had a standardized brick size used across every settlement in the entire civilization, the same ratio, length to width to height, from one end of their territory to the other. That kind of standardization requires central coordination. It requires communication. Mohenjo-Daro alone housed somewhere between 40,000 and 80,000 people. Its streets had covered drainage channels, an engineered sewage system. Individual homes had private bathrooms connected to the city's waste network. Some homes had 2 stories. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, a massive watertight tank lined with bitumen, predates Roman baths by roughly 2,000 years. And yet no pyramids, no massive temples, no royal burial mounds dripping with gold, no palaces. Archaeologists have spent 100 years digging and cannot identify a single building that screams, "This is where the king lived." The Indus Valley civilization appears, almost uniquely among ancient civilizations, to have had no obvious ruling class. No warlord buried with an army of servants, no pharaoh, no emperor, which raises a question that has haunted researchers for decades. How did 5 million people organize themselves, coordinate their cities, standardize their infrastructure, and conduct trade with Mesopotamia, without any of the power structures we assume civilization requires? The answer might be in the writing. If only we could read it. The Indus script was first noticed in the 1870s when British archaeologist Alexander Cunningham found a strange seal at a site in Punjab. He thought it was a foreign import, maybe Babylonian. He was wrong. It was local, and it would take another 50 years before anyone realized it was part of something much bigger. By the 1920s, excavations at Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were pulling up thousands of small, square seals, typically carved from steatite, a soft stone about 2 to 3 centimeters across. Each seal had an animal carved on it, most commonly a creature with a single horn that researchers call the unicorn, though it may be a bull shown in profile. Above or below the animal, inscriptions, symbols, the Indus script. Today we have over 4,000 inscribed objects. Seals, pottery shards, copper tablets, ivory rods. The script has somewhere between 400 and 700 distinct signs, depending on how you count. Some signs look like people, animals, fish, geometric shapes. It was written right to left. We know this because when inscriptions wrap to a second line, the second line starts from the right, and the symbols on the left edge of a line are sometimes slightly compressed, suggesting the writer was running out of space. Those facts represent roughly the limit of what everyone agrees on, because here is the brutal problem. The average inscription is only 5 symbols long. The longest single inscription ever found has 26 symbols. There is no bilingual text, no Rosetta Stone, no inscription where Indus script sits next to a known language. You cannot crack a code if you have no anchor. Dozens of serious decipherment attempts have been made. A Finnish scholar named Asko Parpola has spent over 50 years on it and written what many consider the most thorough analysis. arguing the language is Proto-Dravidian, related to the Tamil and Telugu spoken in southern India today. An American team used computational analysis in 2009 and found the script has statistical properties consistent with a real language rather than just symbols or accounting marks. But even that finding is contested. In 2004, a group of scholars published a paper arguing the Indus script is not a language at all, just a system of religious or political symbols, like logos, with no phonetic content. The rebuttal from the other camp was fierce. The debate is still live. What is not in dispute, whatever this script says, it was important enough to be stamped onto seals used across an entire civilization for roughly 700 years. It traveled with trade goods to Mesopotamia. Harappan seals have been found at the ancient Sumerian city of Ur. They were communicating with the outside world. We just cannot hear what they said. Around 1900 BCE, something went catastrophically wrong. Within a few generations, Mohenjo-Daro was largely abandoned. Harappa shrank dramatically. The entire network of cities began to collapse, not through conquest, not through a single dramatic event, but through a slow, grinding dissolution that ended one of history's greatest civilizations. The old explanation, taught for decades, was invasion. The theory held that horse-riding warriors called Aryans swept in from Central Asia, destroyed the Indus cities, and replaced the population. It was a narrative that fit neatly with certain political agendas in both colonial-era Britain and post-independence India. The problem is the archaeology does not support it. There are almost no weapons found at Indus sites. There are no massacre layers, no burned buildings consistent with conquest, no sudden appearance of a warrior class in the skeletal record from around 1900 BCE. The real story is stranger and sadder. Climate data, pulled from lake sediments, from cave stalagmites, from ancient pollen records, tells a consistent story. The monsoon weakened. The rains that fed the rivers and the agriculture of the Indus world started to fail around 2200 BCE. The Ghaggar-Hakra river system, which ran between the modern Indus and Ganges rivers and supported hundreds of Indus settlements, began drying up. It is possibly the same river called the Saraswati in ancient Vedic texts. A great river now gone, the people adapted for a while. Cities in the drought-affected areas shrank. Populations migrated east toward the Ganges plain where rainfall was more reliable. The urban networks broke apart. The standardized brick sizes disappeared. The carefully engineered sewage systems fell into disrepair. The seals stopped being made, and with the seals, the writing vanished. At some sites, skeletal remains from the late period show signs of disease and malnutrition. At Mohenjo-Daro specifically, a group of skeletons was found scattered in the streets and in houses, unburied, which in a civilization that clearly had mortuary practices is deeply unusual. Something in the final phase was chaotic enough that normal burial rites broke down. But here is the detail that haunts this story. The Indus people did not simply die. Most of them survived. They dispersed. They became something else. And whatever knowledge system the script represented, whatever administrative, religious, or intellectual tradition required that writing, it did not survive the transition. No one taught their children to read it. Within a generation or two, the code was lost even to the people who wrote it. Let's separate what we know from what we speculate, because in Indus Valley studies, those two things get tangled constantly. What we can confirm, the civilization was real, vast, and sophisticated. The standardized weights used across all Indus sites follow a precise binary system, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and a decimal system, 10, 20, 40, 100, 200, 400. Both systems used together seamlessly. This is not a primitive trading society. This is a civilization with abstract mathematical thinking baked into its commercial infrastructure. We know they had long-distance trade. Carnelian beads made in the Indus Valley have been found in Mesopotamia. Tin for bronze, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, timber from the Himalayas, the Indus civilization was a node in an ancient global economy. Their port city of Lothal, in what is now Gujarat in western India, had what archaeologists believe is the world's oldest known dock, a massive brick-lined basin engineered to fill and drain with the tidal patterns of the nearby sea. We know they were not warlike. In 700 years of urban civilization, the weapons found are few and consistent with hunting, not warfare. No fortifications in the traditional military sense. No iconography of conquest, no reliefs of kings smiting enemies, no victory steels. In a world where Akkadian kings were carving monuments to their battlefield massacres, Indus rulers, if they existed, left no such record. What we do not know, who led them, what they believed, what their script says, and what they called themselves. We do not even have a name for these people from their own mouths. Harappan is what we call them after the first excavated site. Indus Valley is a geographic label. Their own name for their civilization, if they had one, is locked inside the seals we cannot read. There is one object that captures this mystery better than any other, the Priest King statue from Mohenjo-Daro. A small, beautifully carved figure in steatite, wearing a robe decorated with trefoil patterns with a headband and an expression of serene, downward gaze. We call him a Priest King because we needed to call him something. He might be a priest. He might be a merchant. He might be a god. We genuinely do not know. He has been staring at us for 5,000 years, and we cannot ask him a single question. Here is the modern parallel that should keep you awake. The Indus Valley civilization thrived for 700 years. It was larger and in many ways more egalitarian than contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia. It apparently managed to coordinate millions of people across 1.25 million square kilometers without kings building monuments to themselves, without armies of conquest, without the visible machinery of domination that we assume is necessary for complex society. And then climate change broke it. Not an invasion, not a war. Not moral failure or political corruption. The rains stopped, the rivers dried, and the entire extraordinary system unraveled over roughly 2 centuries. We are living in a period of accelerating climate instability. Scientists studying Indus Valley collapse have been quite direct about the parallel. A civilization dependent on predictable monsoon patterns and river systems failed when those patterns shifted. The Indus cities were not destroyed. They were abandoned because staying became impossible. The second lesson is about knowledge fragility. Every piece of information the Indus script contains, administrative records, religious texts, trade agreements, personal names, history, poetry, whatever it is permanently beyond us because the knowledge transmission chain was broken. One generation did not teach the next. The script survived physically. The knowledge of how to read it did not. We live in a civilization that has stored incomprehensible amounts of knowledge in digital formats that already require specific, non-intuitive decoding systems. Hard drives from the 1990s are already largely unreadable with modern equipment. Digital formats from 30 years ago are orphaned. We are, without realizing it, creating our own Indus scripts, data that exists, physically intact, and may be completely opaque to anyone who finds it in 100 years. The Indus Valley civilization is not just a mystery about the past. It is a warning written in symbols we cannot read from people who did not know they were leaving a warning about exactly the kinds of failures we are currently risking. 5,000 years ago, someone sat down and pressed a carved seal into clay. They had something to say. They expected it to be understood. We are still trying. If this is the kind of history that actually matters, not the sanitized version, not the simple version, but the real one with its unsolved mysteries and its uncomfortable modern echoes, then subscribe. This channel goes where the history books stop. Every week, a story that has been buried, misrepresented, or simply forgotten, told the way it deserves to be told. Hit subscribe. Turn on the notification bell, and let's keep going. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with. Every great civilization in history believed it was permanent. The Indus Valley people built in standardized brick because they were building for the ages. They engineered drainage systems because they planned on being there a long time. They developed a writing system sophisticated enough to coordinate a continent-scale civilization. They were not wrong to believe in their permanence. They lasted longer than Rome. But the climate did not care about their infrastructure. The rivers did not negotiate. And the script, the one thing that might tell us who they really were, exists only as a question mark. 4,000 artifacts, hundreds of thousands of symbols, complete silence. The Indus Valley did not fail because its people were weak or foolish. It failed because they could not adapt fast enough to a world that changed faster than their institutions could respond. Sound familiar? The code is still unread. The lesson is not. SOTAGS. Ancient History, Indus Valley Civilization, Indus Valley Script, Lost Civilization, Unsolved Historical Mysteries, Harappan Civilization, Forgotten Empires, Dark History, Ancient Mysteries, Bronze Age Collapse, Historical Facts, Mohenjo-Daro, Ancient Writing Systems, History Documentary, History Mysteries Description. The Indus Valley Civilization was the largest on Earth, bigger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. 5 million people. Advanced city planning, running water and flush toilets in 2600 BCE. And a written language that has never been decoded. Over a century of linguists, archaeologists, and computer algorithms have failed to crack a single word of the Indus Valley script. In this video, we go inside the mystery. Why this civilization had no obvious kings or armies, how climate change brought it down, and why the collapse of a 5,000-year-old civilization should be a warning for today. Real evidence, real archaeology. the history class never taught you. Subscribe for Forgotten History, Ancient Mysteries, and Dark History every week. Ancient History, Lost Civilization, Indusfully Historimystery, Forgotten History.